Okay, so the next stage seems to be about handling invalid commands. So let's get started with that. Uh, the stage will implement support for printing error messages for invalid commands. Okay, so in this stage, I'm not just going to print a prompt, but instead I'm going to actually take in a user input. And no matter what the user inputs, if there is an enter at the end, I just say command not form. I print out whatever the user inputted, and I say command not found. Is it recording? Yes, I think so. Great. Okay, so let's implement this. In this stage, you'll implement support for printing error messages for invalid commands. Example, you have the prompt that was printed at the end of stage 1, and you have user input, and you say command not found. For now, we'll treat all commands as invalid, and later stages we'll handle executing valid commands like echo, cd, etc. How to pass the stage. Unlike stage 1, your repository doesn't contain commented code to pass the stage. Cool. So yeah, let's get started on this. So here, I think how do I read the user's command? Right, so I think in Python, you use the input function to read string input from the user. So I can say command equals input. And I suppose it stops reading when the user enters an enter. So after reading the input, let's make use of f strings. We say command colon command. Yeah, I think that should work. So the assumption I'm making here is that pressing an enter terminates the waiting of the function call, and it sends the input to, or it sets command to the input. But let's save and run this and just see if it works. Right, so I don't think they have actually mentioned how to run this anywhere. Maybe I can just invoke Python. Okay, Python 3. Right, so Python 3 main.py. Awesome. Okay, so I think it works. So input does indeed stop reading whenever the user presses enter, and it returns the string without the new line character at the end of the string, which is interesting. Okay, but I think I should probably using the UV lock. I should be using the UV package manager in order to execute this program, because that seems like a more professional way to do it. Because manually invoking Python seems kind of it's okay for smaller programs, but in a professional setting, I would assume that you need some kind of like orchestration runner program, which a higher level runner program or orchestration framework in place. Cool. Oh, great. I think it's your program. Use that script to run your program locally. Exec uv quiet app.main. Okay. So this seems kind of complicated because I don't have UV installed. So I'm not particularly familiar with how to install UV on Mac OS because I'm actually from Linux, and there I could just do apt install UV, I assume, or maybe pip install. I can do the same thing here, but I'm not very comfortable with how packages work on Mac OS, so it seems like an unnecessary thing to do right now. Maybe I can just skip it for now because of just invoking Python and passing the script to it, I think works just fine. But anyway, so command not found. I think I can pass this. So add. Okay, awesome. How do I read the user's command? How do I print the command not found messages? So here I've used f strings, and here I've used input. Awesome. Let's just move on then. Read user input and output invalid command and push. And this is pretty cool how they've got everything to work where you have tests that are executed when a user pushes to the repository. Interesting. So here they seem to be starting build. Perhaps they're setting up an entire environment. Okay. Running tests. Received command not found message. Received prompt. Okay, so I think it's running tests in the reverse order, which is interesting. I would assume that it starts with the first test. Anyway, interesting, so it does work. And I wonder if it's also checking whether or not the command that's not found is appropriately printed in the output itself. Itself is printed in the output. Okay. Awesome, let's move on. Implement a REPL. A REPL is a read eval print loop where you have a prompt and then you read certain user input, and then you process it, and then you just loop back and you output certain information, and then you loop back. That's a read eval print loop. Is an interactive loop that forms the core of a shell. Perfect. That's how shells work, I think. So yeah, so a shell is basically an interactive command-based program, command-based compiler of sorts. It follows a repeating cycle: read, eval, print, loop. Perfect. Awesome. Display the prompt, then wait for a line of input. Print. For any command the user inputs, return to step 1. Great. Okay, so this seems to be putting the previous step in a while loop. That's about it, but except that I'm also going to print out the prompt itself. So I think I've just got to put the entire thing in while true. And I suppose we don't need pass here anymore. And so you're going to read, you're going to evaluate. So this is the evaluation. So this is where the evaluation would ideally go. Or in between the input and the print, and then we're back to looping on these 3 lines of code. I think this should work. Let's try. Okay, awesome. So I think it works. So Control C, keyboard interrupt. Okay. So I think this should work. Let's try to print and push. Let's try to push to the repository. So add read eval print loop. So, okay, read eval print loop. That forms, it's a shell concept where a shell continually reads for user input, reads and evaluates a user input, and prints the prompt after having evaluated it. Okay. Git push. Awesome. So, all right, yeah, so it seems like the tests have passed. However, it doesn't seem to be as random as they claim to be. Because here, the exact number of commands sent will be random. The loop should run indefinitely. The tester will terminate your program when the test is complete. I mean, I'm sure there are ways to write the program in a way to get around the checks that try to check for both of these things, but sure. I think I do understand what this step wants us to learn, and I have implemented it. So I think the core concept that I should be taking away from this step is REPL. So read eval print loop. And that's something that I should be taking away from this stage. Awesome. Let's move on. All right, so the shell has certain built-ins, and built-ins are basically commands that are not external programs, but rather something that the shell processes itself. For example, cd changes the state of the shell itself. It doesn't invoke another command. It's not a different process being forked. So here we are implementing the shell built-in, the exit built-in. It takes an optional numeric argument as the shell's exit status, exit 0, exit 1. It determines it immediately with the specified exit code. Yeah, this is interesting because if the exit built-in command takes any arbitrary exit value, then why would the tester always pass 0? You might as well just write a good test. Right. Anyway, so I think the point here is to write code that processes a built-in. So I can do that by processing command. So yeah, so I think now is a good time to start thinking about how exactly a command is structured. So I assume that whenever your user inputs something, it's typically either a shell built-in, and a bunch of arguments, or it's a program that is located in one of the path directories, and we have arguments that need to be passed to the program, right? So very simply, I think, it gets complicated with quote characters and so on, but for now, just to keep it simple, I think that what we can do is whatever the user inputted is, split it on the space character, and the first element of the resultant split string is our command. The rest of them are are arguments. I think that's one way to look at it. So this is, so let's not call it command. So that's going to be input actually. But can I just name it input? But I assume that it would conflict with the function name input. So I'm not sure. Anyway, I'll just call it input. I'm not sure whether or not it's going to conflict with the function name input. But I'm going to split. I'm going to say input dot split. Split on the space character. So in Python, I don't know if this is how you split a string on a separator. I think this is how you do it. But I just wish I had this in memory. So, okay, so what's the question in Python? Given a particular string, how do you split on a separator? I think string.split makes a lot of sense. So you have, yeah, I think this would make things very easy, but I have a feeling that this is not how you do it. Right, I think the way it works is the separator goes first and then you pass the string that needs to be split to it. Anyway, let's ask ChatGPT. How do I split a string on a separator? Yeah, I feel like these are things I should just know and have intuitions for. Okay, so text.split. Yeah. Okay, so I think I was right. I just need to use this. So, I can replace input with this. So this is the input. Then command is going to be the first element of the input. Right? And so now is where it gets kind of tricky. So command can be a built-in, or it can be a program that's in one of the path directories. So what I've got to do here is a very simple way to do it would be, again, so this is a very greedy approach. I'm sure in the back of my mind, there seems to be a lot of discomfort with doing this because I think that there should be a lot of structure in the code, in the sense that I want to structure this in a better way. And I suppose that parsers do a much better job at this, but for now, I'll say if command equals exit, then, I mean, in order to pass this stage, I don't need to care about the exit code. So, but sure, I can say exit code equals imp1. Convert this into a string. So I've got to convert this into an integer. Again, this is going to end up throwing an error if there's a problem with the conversion. But sys.exit basically calls the system call exit with the specified exit code. Okay, I think I can remove this comment. Okay. Let's try to run this. And in order to get the previous exit code, I think we can use this symbol. Interesting. So this says 68. Is that right? I don't think it's right. So I'm converting it into an integer. Input 1, exit 324. I think that's how you convert, in Python, that's how you convert from a string to an integer. You just use the int function call. I'm not sure if it's a function call, but it looks like a function call. Okay, so I think the exit codes above 127 are wrapped around, and that's the reason it's 68. I don't want to get into how it's wrapped around, but sure, it could be an operating system thing. And I think I can move on. So here, I've implemented not just exit, but also exiting with the right exit code. So I think I have implemented the exit built-in, but with full awareness that this is probably not the way to parse input, because it is probably going to get unwieldy with time. So, okay, yeah, let's try to run this. Let's try to run and push this and see where we go from there. So this implements implement exit built-in. Show version master. I hope this works. So I've actually implemented more than what this particular stage asks me to implement. Oh, interesting. So here, so remember I remarked that the number of commands that it uses to test the command not found feature is not actually random. It turns out it is random, and maybe 3 was just another random number. X0, the program exited successfully, not put after exit command. Awesome. Right, so here it's testing whether exit works differently from other commands, which I think it does. Okay, so I think I can move on to the next step. Okay, so I seem to have implemented the echo built in, but there is actually a lot of complexity that's kind of hidden away by the simplicity of what this particular stage asks us to implement. Well, the first is that the way arguments are processed seems a little confusing in the sense that yeah, just the fact that if there are multiple spaces between arguments, how exactly it's handled, it's just if there are multiple spaces, all of those spaces are kind of squashed, and things are sent as individual arguments to the command or built-in being invoked. That is, I don't know. I'm just finding that difficult to sit with, uh, and yeah. So I had to modify the split here to to account for that. It turns out that because I was splitting on a space and there are two spaces, it was creating elements. It was creating empty string elements. Again, I don't want to think through that. But intuitively, this seems like it seems like a fix. I'm not sure if whether or not I should be thinking through that because it's not crystal clear in my head why exactly this works. It's just intuition. Anyway, so I think for this particular step, I think I can just move on. Yeah, it doesn't feel good to be honest because uh, of the way my code is structured here, and I know that this is simply not what the entirety of the shell actually implements. This is a very, very small subset. And sure, echo something, which I think is fair enough. Yeah, so I think I've implemented the type built-in. Uh, of course, it's not very. It is going to get very unwieldy as the entire code gets very big, but I think sure it is. Yeah, I think it gets the job done. I think the important thing here is to like know what type is. Basically, in a shell, type gives you whether it's a built-in, it's a command, or it's an executable file. Yeah, I think that's what the important thing to register here is. But yeah, I really wonder what the expectation of this particular project is, in the sense that they expect us to learn formal parsing, as in, do they expect us to learn how to parse properly? And I suppose that parsing for shells are different from parsing for programming languages, where shell is a kind of programming language, but it's like a lot simpler. Um, but I assume that Bash can be an entire programming language too, which is interesting actually. Because it has for loops, it has arrays, and all of that. But I think the POSIX Unix shell itself is very, very simple, and the specification was actually something that I went through, or something that I glanced at. It was incredibly dry. Anyway, so let's go on to the next stage, which is to locate executable files, and I assume to execute executable files, but okay, so this just seems to be just locating the executable file. Yeah, I think this is going to be a lot trickier, or it's going to be a lot more real world than the other ones, which were simple string manipulations. But yeah, it does actually seem pretty exciting to locate executable files and to print out the location of that particular command. I think it does sound exciting. Cool. Yeah, so let's do it. In this stage, you'll extend the type built in to search for executable files using path. The path environment variable. The path environment variable specifies a list of directories where the shell should look for executable programs. For example, if the path is set to dir1, and then you have the path separator, dir2, and dir3, in that order. So an executable is basically a file that can be executed. And yeah, there's a whole layer of complexity there itself, but sure, I think I do understand the high-level picture of it. It's an executable file, of what an executable file is. They have basically given us a bunch of steps to follow in order to look for executable files, and where exactly the executable file is located. All right, so for given a particular directory, I need to list out the contents of that directory, list out the contents of that directory, and figure out whether or not a file, with that name exists in that directory. Okay, so for dir and dir, so the reason why I'm getting kind of like stumbling here is that it's just that every time you open up a directory, you've got to close file pointers, file descriptors, and all of that. But this is Python, so I assume that there are higher level functions. So basically, given a particular, yeah, sure, yeah, let's start from the higher level idea and then work our way to the lower levels. Given a particular directory, I want to get a list of files in that directory. And if the name of a file in that directory matches command, then I check if it's executable. Because if it's not executable, then I'm not going to be able to run it. Right. And then I need to do other things from there on. But I need a list. On a very high level, I need to go through every file in this directory. Yeah, one thing I don't understand is they have actually given a qualification saying that dir could actually not exist, but there's a lot of other qualifications that could have been made in the previous commands, right? So why did they choose to make such a qualification starting with this command in particular? Is this where they're saying things are gonna level up or something? Yeah, it just seems, yeah, it just strikes me as stupid, or, well, not stupid, but just bizarre. But yeah, but I suppose you do actually want to keep the earlier steps as simple as possible. That's not clear. Anyway, so I think I can do this. So get list files and directory. So again, I'm going to ChatGPT it. Yeah, so yeah, I think ChatGPT is a massive help here because the official documentation is very often like just mired in like unnecessary formalism, and it's difficult to actually extract information from it. But of course, with a heavy qualification that ChatGPT can make a lot of mistakes, and of course, for critical applications, it probably, yeah, I don't know. My thoughts are all over the place with respect to this, but I think just in order to solve the problem, I think, sure. Yeah, this is a way to solve the problem. Not a very good way, but it's a way to solve the problem. And yeah, just, yeah, I suppose that one needs to first become good at putting in the time to solve problems rather than making it perfect. As long as I'm aware that, right, so I think I'm aware that this is non-performance critical. I can basically point out specific places in the code that I think could be wrong that ChatGPT has given me, or things that require more qualification somewhere. Anyway, given a directory in Python, okay, os.listdir. Interesting. This returns all entries, files, and subdirectories in the directories and listed names. Wow, so ChatGPT is giving me 4 different ways to do this, which is so annoying. So I would assume that a programming language like Go, there is like one just idiomatic way to do it, but Python, because of like how old it is and how many people use it, sure, but it has advantages too. The number of ways of doing anything is multiple, and therefore, because it's since a long time, there is multiple ways of doing things. There's multiple ways of doing things, and maybe multiple camps out there, like just looking, espousing one particular way over another. Okay, so let's just get something done. Let's just use Lister because it seems easy enough. Yeah, I think Lister seems easy enough for me. And yeah, if I want to change things up in the future, I can. But yeah, I think this is where talking to experts might actually help. Where yeah, I think this is where reading code written by experts helps. You get to see what the state of the art is. It's kind of difficult to get it from ChatGPT because here I have to ask a follow-up question, which is the best way, and very often I have to, or I assume that it's not going to understand what exactly I mean. I could be wrong there, but I would prefer to also have, in order to become really good at programming, I would assume that one requires human interaction as well. All right, anyway, so Lister, let's actually do this. So files equals os.list. I'm going to get files in that particular directory. Yeah, it's interesting that isFile is a method that's in the path directory, that's in the path submodule. I would assume, yeah, it just seems arbitrary. Because files are something that have to do with the operating system and not path necessarily. I would assume path is mostly for string operations involving paths. Things like joining, splitting, and so on. I'm sure. Yeah, so os.path, for example, this does make a lot of sense. But yeah, let me just yoink this from here and use it for now. Because my intent here is pretty, on a high level, I think my intent is clear. If I'm going through each of the path directories, and in a particular path directory, I'm listing all the files and going through each of the files, and if a file is, if the file is a subdirectory, then I don't want to do anything with it. But if it's a file, if it's a regular file, then I'm good. So I've got to check if a file is executable. Right, so I can combine the two into one because I think directories can be executable and not actually execute anything. So Python check if Right, so here I think I've missed a crucial step where I've got to ensure that the file that I'm looking at has the same name as the command that the user has provided. So if file not equal to, yeah, so here's where it's getting difficult to follow along because there are so many nested, it feels as though there are like too many nested loops and if else conditions. But yeah, let's try to just break this down in sub pieces and approach it that way. Okay, yeah, let's, this is a skill that I've got to get better at. Breaking things into sub-problems and trying to solve things that way. So, all right, so what do I do here? Okay, yeah, it's getting difficult to sustain attention, but yeah, I just want to complete this. So the problem is if I move x found outside, I'm not going to be able to break whenever I find a file that matches the name and is executable and is a file, is a regular file. Okay. Yeah, I just have, I mean, I feel as though this is probably going to work, and I have a temptation to just run it and try to just move on if it works. But again, I don't think that's like good in the sense that I think you need to have like you need to have like a level of comfort that you're okay with your code. And right now I don't have that. But I think yeah, maybe I can try to attain that. Okay, so I think everything is contained within type, so that's good. So type something, and that's when this is going to run. And if it's a built-in, it's all good. Yeah, I think this should work. Yeah, I just went through the code, and I think I have a better understanding of it now. So essentially here, if it's not a shell built-in, that I'm going through all the directories, and I'm going through all the files in the directories, and I'm marking whether or not I found a file with the same name, is a regular file, and it's executable. And if it is, if I haven't found that, which means it means that I never printed that, and so therefore I can now print that I've not found it. But yeah, it's just that yeah, I have a really bad feeling that future things are going to get complicated. And if I don't understand this, or if I'm not able to structure this code in my mind now, there is no point of proceeding, because everything in the so all the future code is going to be even more convoluted than this. But sure, I think I've gotten this working, and I think that yeah, just in terms of the cognitive effort, I think it makes cognitive sense. It makes logical sense what this program does. Let's try to run it. Okay. Well, first of all, I don't know what the path variable is. Type is shell type. I don't know, cd. Wow, okay. Interesting. I wouldn't have assumed that user bin contains cd. Wow, okay. Okay, that's very weird for sure. I've got to look into it. But what about the other user local bin? What about this here? I assume that it had to do with macOS not giving any random program permission to access files, but that's interesting. Interesting. So there is no bin here, but it's added to path anyway. Okay, so this probably has to do with macOS and the way macOS deals with executables and path variables and so on. Okay, so let's try to run this once again. Hi, unfound, maybe. Cool. I think this should work. Right, so I feel like gracefully is sure. Just kind of, yeah, this is definitely not very graceful. So ideally, what I would do is I would probably try to understand different kinds of exceptions that could occur and take actions based on that. So if file is not found, then I'm all good. But then if it's some other kind of exception where I don't have permission, I think in this particular case, I think it's okay. I just want to list. Yeah, it really depends on what kinds of errors could happen. But sure, I think this is graceful enough. Oh, let's yeah, let's see if this works. Yeah, this was by far the most complicated thing I've written so far. Okay, so cat is bin cat, bin cp, bin makedir, received expected response. Okay. Yeah, you can get into really gnarly cases where the file is a directory, and I suppose that. And I have no idea whether or not they've included that, but it just seems like a very complicated problem all in all to handle all the cases. Here, so writing reliable software is hard, or you don't run into a lot of the issues very often. I think that's another interpretation of whatever's happening. You just try to implement the most important cases. Sure, let's move on. But again, here I not only used the standard library, but also ChatGPT to understand how to use the standard library. So it's not the best, but it is something. So it is something. All right, so I think this is going to be a difficult one. running a program. So here, your executable file is basically in a particular directory. So you're supposed to basically, if the command starts with if the command is a path, then you're supposed to execute whatever the directory is, whatever the file that is passed is. So here I'm going to be running external programs, but again, I think the wording is a little off here, but sure. Oh, but sure. So here we're not just. Oh, this is not a part of type. This is going to execute. Interesting. Search for an executable file with the given name in the directories listed in path, just like type does. If found, execute the program. Pass any arguments from the command line to the program. For example, interesting. Okay, this is, I think, is where it gets interesting, but it also gets very gnarly because I think the code, I've got to like redo a lot of the code. Got to copy and paste a lot of the code, I suppose. Yeah, let's just start small, I suppose. So here we're not implementing type. We're instead checking if it exists in path. So else. Yeah, so I think the thoughts that I'm having here are that I don't want to copy the entire block of code here related to path, where I go through all the path directories and check if there is an executable file of that sort. I do not want to copy it because that just seems incompetent. I think the solution is to somehow abstract this away. But I would say an incompetent solution is better than no solution at all. Because, do I want to? Do I want to abstract this away? Yeah, I think, I should probably just do whatever I want to. Do I want to abstract this away? So one of the ways I could abstract this is I could write a function that, given a command, checks if the command exists in one of the path files, and if it does, it returns the path to the executable. And so if it's not empty, it means that I can just execute it. Okay, let's actually move on. Let's just get it working first before abstracting it away. Yeah, so another thing that's, I feel like the thing is overlooking here and is kind of confusing me is that if you're giving a path, then the executable of that particular path should be executed. So I think that's probably going to be done somewhere. But sure, I can see how that's not necessarily included. Okay. So I'm not sure how scoping works in Python, so can I just reuse file path here? Yeah, so let me just think about how I would approach it. Just if I were to tell someone, okay, file path is this, I would just reuse it. Yeah, I'm just going to execute file path with those with the given arguments, and here arguments are going to be inputs from one to the rest. Okay. So given a particular, so I want to execute it. So I think, so how do you execute how do you execute a process or an executable in Python and then pass arguments to it? And then whatever it prints out, you want to print that out too. And then after that, you want to print a new line. Yeah, I think that should be easy. So you can ask ChatGPT how to execute a program at a given file Python at a given location would be better. So given a list, how do I kind of expand it within another list? So I think in Go, I've written a lot of Go, you use the ellipsis operator where you can embed the contents of one list inside another list. But I wonder how to do that in Python. Yeah, I do remember reading about a particular list function. Okay. In Python, oh wow, okay. A plus B, interesting. Wow, okay. This is awesome, yeah. File path plus. Yeah, I think this should work. So process out run. Oh, awesome. Cool. Yeah, it's pretty interesting that I hope there is no malware on the system. This kind of looks suspect. Apple.security.quickTXT. What about Python? Okay, so Python is probably a part of ops. Great. Okay, so it's a part of Python. Okay, awesome. Oh, shoot. Yeah, it's just getting recursive, kind of, and it's difficult to think about. But I think LNS is a built-in, actually. Oh, wow, okay. Yeah, so I wonder if bin is in... Oh, it is, okay. Wow, okay. So clear was actually run inside that. But yeah, I feel as though the formatting is somehow weird. And I'm wondering if that's an artifact of the way I've coded things up, or it's because I've had a lot of issues with terminal encodings or terminal text. I'm not sure, but let's try to run this and see if it works. Add Python. So add ability to execute program. Right. So yeah, I think it could be from one of the previous commands. It might have messed something up. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I have a feeling that it's gonna fail, but if it succeeds, it's yeah, I don't know. Oh, great. Cool. Wow. I can't read that. It's oh, perfect. Okay, the logs are here, and I can actually just look them up here. Program was passed 3 arguments. Oh, interesting. So here the entire path of the program is sent, but it's not expecting the entire path. So, do I need to change the directory and then execute it? Because Yeah, I think the problem with this is that I've just got to, I'm sorry, I've just got to, yeah, but it feels as though it's sus for some reason because like it's just like random, and I'm sure that many other people would have run into this issue as well. Um, wow, there are 35 other stages available in this challenge categorized as extensions, which is interesting. Yeah, I do want to continue actually thinking about this, but my brain's like not working right now. But I think, yeah, my thoughts are, yeah, I'm kind of uncomfortable with the way I've just reused the code for type and for running the program, and I think that's just not the way to do it. So, yeah, I'm just gonna think about that for a bit, like what it means and how I want to develop a better abstraction. And also the new line problem at the end. Yeah, I had an intuition for how to fix it, but it just seems kind of arbitrary and bizarre, and I'm sure people must have run into it. And I'm just wondering why they chose, again, so if they chose the bad option, by bad I mean that uh, the program itself is outputting a new line, and therefore our program doesn't need to output a new line after that. I don't know. That seems kind of sus. But yeah, but again, it gets into the recursive problem where like you have echo that's called by the actual program, and yeah, I'm not sure how that's gonna work. Yeah, I yeah, I'm just gonna rest and think about this in an unstructured manner to make better sense of it. And yeah, so I'll return to this tomorrow. All right. Thank you. Bye.